I stood there in my office, feeling the weight of the decision on my shoulders. I had just fired a new manager, Thomas, without a second thought. My instincts told me he wasn't a good fit, and he didn't seem to understand the company's culture at all. He was barely on his second week, but I knew the company couldn't afford a mistake like this. My team and I worked too hard to let someone drag us down. I could hear the quiet murmur of voices from the hallway, but I was so focused on the task ahead that I didn't register any of it. I took a deep breath and looked at the papers in front of me, reviewing my next steps. The decision was final. He was gone. I made a mental note to have his things cleared out by the end of the day. It felt like just another ordinary day at the office. Then, I heard a knock at my door. "Come in," I called, barely glancing up. The door opened slowly, and in walked Thomas. His face was a mixture of confusion and anger. I couldn't understand why he was here, and for a split second I considered if he had come to try and talk me out of my decision. But then something caught my eye. It was the look in his eyes. Something about it made me pause. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice steady, but there was an undertone of something I couldn't quite place. "Sure," I replied, putting down the papers. "But I'm afraid the decision is final." He stepped into the room, his gaze never leaving mine. I had no idea what to expect, but I certainly didn't expect what came next. "I know you probably don't want to hear this," he started, his voice shaking just slightly, "but I'm your father." My heart stopped. It was like the room spun for a moment, and I could barely comprehend what he had just said. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the words, but they didn't add up. He was my father? Impossible. I stared at him, unable to speak. There was no way this could be true. Thomas continued, "I know it sounds crazy, but it's the truth. I need you to hear me out." I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. My father? The man standing before me, fired just moments ago. My mind refused to believe it, but his eyes, they held a depth of truth that I couldn't ignore. Was this some kind of sick joke? It didn't make sense. It couldn't make sense. He looked at me, waiting for a response, and then something in me snapped. I took a step back, almost stumbling over my own feet. My thoughts were racing faster than I could keep up with. My father? This man, this stranger to me, was supposed to be my father? "You're lying," I said, though my voice trembled. It was the only thing I could manage to say. I crossed my arms in front of me, a protective barrier that I needed more than anything at that moment. "You're just trying to mess with me because you got fired. You have no idea what you're talking about." But Thomas didn't flinch. His face softened, and the sadness in his eyes was almost more than I could bear. There was a vulnerability there that I hadn't noticed before. His shoulders dropped a little, and I saw the weight of something unspoken in his gaze. "I didn't want you to find out this way," he said quietly. "I've been trying to track you down for years. I wanted to explain everything to you, but I didn't know how." I shook my head, my mind refusing to process the words. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could feel the heat rising in my face. Anger, confusion, disbelief, they all swirled within me. "You're telling me," I said, my voice shaking with frustration, "that you've been watching me? Following me? My whole life, and I never knew?" Thomas nodded, his hands clenched at his sides, as if fighting the urge to reach out. "I know it's a lot to take in, but I've thought about this moment every day. I've wanted to tell you for so long, but I didn't think you'd ever forgive me. I didn't think you'd even want to know me." A bitter laugh escaped me, and I couldn't help it. "Forgive you? For what? For abandoning me? For not being there when I needed you?" His eyes dropped to the floor, and for a moment I thought he might say something else, something more to explain himself, but instead, he just sighed. "I never wanted to leave you," he whispered. "But circumstances, life, it was all so complicated. I made mistakes, I know that, and I am so sorry, but I had no idea how to fix it, how to be a father when I was never given the chance." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream at him, to tell him he didn't deserve any sympathy, that he'd had plenty of time to fix things, and now it was too late. But another part of me, the part I didn't want to acknowledge, felt something else, something softer. A tiny flicker of longing? Could it be? I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. "Why now?" I asked, my voice still shaky, though I tried to keep it steady. Why tell me now, after all these years? After everything I've been through? He hesitated for a long moment, as if the answer was difficult to put into words. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw, filled with regret. Because I knew you were about to fire me, he said, and I couldn't let you make that decision without knowing who I was, without you understanding that I am your father. The words landed like a punch, and I took a step back, the room suddenly feeling smaller. The reality of the situation was sinking in, but I still couldn't wrap my head around it. This man who I had just let go was my father, the one who had abandoned me all those years ago. He continued, his voice barely above a whisper. I've watched you grow from afar, seen everything you've accomplished. You're incredible, and I'm proud of you. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to want anything to do with me. But I needed you to know the truth. I could feel the tension in my chest, my emotions battling with each other. Anger, disbelief, confusion. But there was something else too, a deep, aching part of me that wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that somewhere in this broken man was the father I had always longed for. But the hurt, the years of abandonment, it was too much, too deep. I don't know if I can handle this, I said, my voice breaking as I finally allowed the tears to come. This is too much to just accept. Thomas stepped forward slowly, but I raised a hand to stop him. Please don't. I can't. I need space. I don't even know what to feel right now. For a moment, he just stood there, looking at me with such sadness that it almost felt unbearable. Then, with a heavy sigh, he nodded. I understand, he said quietly. I'm sorry. As he turned to leave, I collapsed into my chair, my mind spinning. How was I supposed to process this? How could I just let him back into my life after all this time? The door clicked softly behind him, and I was left alone in my office. Alone with a truth I wasn't ready to face. My mind felt like it was stuck in a whirlwind, spinning out of control. My father, my biological father, the man I had spent my entire life wondering about, resenting, hating, he was here. He was real. And everything I thought I knew was shattered in an instant. I stared at the papers on my desk, the ones I had been so focused on just minutes ago, but they didn't matter anymore. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't even think straight. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart, reminding me that I was alive, that this moment was real. He's your father, and you just fired him. How could you have done that? The guilt washed over me like a wave, but it was quickly replaced by anger. He's the one who abandoned me. He's the one who left us. I clenched my fists, gripping the edges of my desk as if I could physically force my emotions to stop. How dare he waltz back into my life after all this time and expect me to just forgive him? But something inside me stirred. There was a tiny flickering thought I couldn't quite suppress. A part of me that wanted to know more. Wanted to know why he left, why he couldn't be there. Why, after all these years, he decided to show up now. I couldn't deny it. I was curious. Part of me needed to understand, but the other part of me, my pride, my pain, wanted nothing to do with him. Suddenly, the door opened again, and I looked up, startled. It was my assistant, Maria. She stepped in cautiously, her face full of concern. Are you okay, Miss Lawson? She asked softly, her eyes glancing at the door where Thomas had just exited. I took a deep breath, wiping my eyes quickly. I hadn't realized I was crying. I don't know, Maria. I really don't know. She walked in slowly, closing the door behind her, and then paused, clearly unsure whether to say anything. Finally, she spoke, her voice gentle but direct. I overheard some of what happened, she said quietly. And I wanted to tell you. I've been working here for a while now, and I've never seen you like this before. Whatever this is, I know it's hard, but you don't have to go through it alone. I stared at her for a moment, feeling an overwhelming sense of gratitude and vulnerability. I wasn't used to showing weakness, especially not in front of my staff. But Maria, with her soft eyes and caring demeanor, made me feel like it was okay to not have everything figured out. I don't know what to do, Maria, I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. I fired him, and now I find out he's my father. I don't know how to process this. It's too much. She nodded, sitting down in one of the chairs across from me. It's okay to feel confused. It's okay to feel angry. But I think what matters is what you decide to do next. You don't have to make any decisions right away. Just give yourself some time to think. I appreciated her words, but I couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed in an instant. My life, the one I had worked so hard to build, had been turned upside down. I had spent years creating a persona, a world where I didn't need anyone, certainly not someone who had abandoned me as a child. But now, here he was, the man who had played a role in shaping me, even if I never knew it. What if I can't forgive him? I asked, more to myself than to Maria. What if I can't let him back in? Maria didn't say anything at first. She just let the silence hang in the air. And then, finally, she spoke. You don't have to forgive him right away, but you also don't have to shut him out completely. You don't have to decide anything today. Just let it all sit with you for a bit. Her words were simple, but they felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I didn't have to have all the answers. I didn't have to fix this right now. The door opened again, and I looked up, expecting it to be Maria again. But this time it was Thomas. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. He was standing there, his face softer than before. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at me with those tired eyes that seemed to hold so many unspoken emotions. Then, after a moment, he spoke. I know you don't want to hear from me, he said, his voice quieter this time, almost pleading. But I wanted to apologize again, for everything. I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I hope you can at least understand that I never meant to hurt you. I never meant to hurt anyone. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face and tell him to leave. But another part of me, the part I wasn't ready to face, wanted to listen. Maybe, just maybe, he really was sorry. I stood up slowly, my hands shaking. I need time, Thomas. I don't know what to say to you right now, but I'm not ready to just forgive you. He nodded, his eyes downcast, clearly understanding. I understand, he said quietly, before turning and walking away. As the door clicked shut behind him, I was left standing there, my emotions torn in 1,000 directions. I had fired him. I had pushed him away. And yet, a part of me was already wondering if there was a chance for us to rebuild something. A chance to heal. But the road ahead would be long, and I didn't know if I was strong enough to face it. The days after Thomas's revelation felt like a blur. I went through the motions at work, meetings, deadlines, decisions that needed to be made, but it all felt hollow. I couldn't stop thinking about him, about what he had said, about the father I never knew. It was as if his words had cracked open a part of me that I'd sealed shut years ago. And now, I couldn't ignore the painful truth. Every time I walked past the empty desk where he had sat, I felt a twist in my chest. I had fired him. I had thrown him out of my life. And yet every part of me wanted to go back, to somehow undo what I had done. But could I? Could I let him back in after everything? After years of abandonment, after all the anger I'd carried, I didn't have the answers. It was a week later when I finally made the decision to reach out to him. I didn't know what I was hoping for, but I knew I couldn't keep running away from this. So I picked up the phone and called the number he had left with my assistant. The one number that tied him to me. It rang 3 times before he answered. Hello? His voice was cautious, like he wasn't sure whether to believe this was really happening. Thomas, I said, my throat tight, but determined. It's me. I need to talk. There was a long pause, and then I heard him exhale as if he had been holding his breath. I'm glad you called. I don't know what I'm doing, I admitted, the words feeling like a weight off my chest, but I can't stop thinking about what you said, about who you are. He was quiet for a moment, and I could hear the soft rustling of papers in the background. I understand, he finally said, his voice quiet but steady. I know it's a lot to take in, and I'm not asking for anything from you. But if you ever want to meet, to talk more, I'll be here. I hesitated. I wasn't ready for forgiveness, not yet, but I wasn't ready to close the door forever either. I think I need to see you, I said finally, my voice trembling just a little. I need to understand more. I need to hear your side of the story. Please don't make me do this alone. He agreed without hesitation, and we set up a time to meet. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending this wasn't real. The man who had been absent from my life for so long, he was here. And for the first time, I was ready to listen. The day of the meeting came, and I found myself sitting in a quiet cafe, anxiously waiting for Thomas to arrive. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for, but my heart was racing in my chest as I kept glancing at the door. And then there he was. He looked older, of course, but his eyes were the same. They held that same sadness, that same depth I had seen when he spoke to me in my office. I stood up, feeling the weight of the moment. For a brief second, neither of us spoke. It was as if we were both taking the measure of each other, unsure of where to begin. He finally broke the silence. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry for not being there, for not being the father you needed, for not being the man I should have been." I felt a lump form in my throat, but I pushed it down. I wasn't ready to forgive him, not yet, but there was a part of me that wanted to hear everything. I needed to understand. "Why did you leave?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. "Why didn't you come back?" He took a deep breath, and for the first time since we had started talking, he looked vulnerable. "I was young," he said, his eyes distant as if he were reliving a painful memory. "I was scared. I thought I wasn't enough for you, for your mother. I didn't think I could be the kind of father you deserved. And then, by the time I realized what I'd done, it felt like it was too late. I thought if I stayed away, I'd be protecting you. But I see now how wrong I was." I listened intently, my heart aching with each word. Part of me wanted to shout at him, to tell him that he had hurt me beyond repair. But another part of me, one I didn't recognize, just wanted him to keep talking, to tell me everything. "I tried to find you," he continued. "I tried, every year, to track you down. But I was never brave enough to face you. And when I heard you had become the CEO of the company, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't keep running away." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know if I could ever forgive him, or if I should even try. "I don't know where we go from here," I said quietly, feeling the tears sting my eyes. "But I need time. Time to think." "I understand," he said, his voice soft and full of regret. "I'll be here, whenever you're ready." Months passed before I could truly process everything. I spent time reflecting, talking to people I trusted, and most importantly, allowing myself to feel the emotions I had buried for so long. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick, but slowly, I began to understand something crucial. I wasn't ready to completely forgive him, not yet, but I wasn't ready to cut him out either. The journey of healing, of rebuilding trust, would take time. But what mattered was that I had taken the first step. I had acknowledged the pain, the loss, and the possibility of something new. One evening, as I sat in my office looking out at the city below, I picked up the phone again. I didn't know what the future would look like, but I knew that I couldn't face it alone. "Thomas," I said when he answered, "I think it's time we talk about what happens next." And for the first time in years, I felt a small glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. Thank you so much for watching this story. If it touched you or made you think, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more emotional and dramatic stories like this one. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so comment below and let us know what you think, or share your own experiences. And if you enjoyed it, share with your friends. Let's spread the drama and suspense. Your support means the world to us. Stay tuned for more and take care.